All right, back on the mic, trying to discuss world history a little bit, the Greek and Roman culture, and how these cities in Europe, including from Epsom to Bath to the Dolomites in Italy and the regions around there. There's so many actually. These are just bigger ones, but there's so many. And even throughout the US and all over the world, you find this same sort of pattern of different types of high mineral particularities in the water or sediments or vegetation or that is contributing to certain beneficial health of the population living there. So if we start with like Loutraki is a very interesting one because this is where the Greeks, they called it thermae, which is like the master bath, I guess. I mean, Loutraki means bath in Greek, not Loutraki. I think it's Lut or something like that. I don't know how to say it, but and so that thermal was the inspiration for the natural baths were the inspiration for the unnatural baths, meaning not unnatural, but I guess like the system of bath culture with the hypocaust system, which was the heating cauldrons underneath the floor, the tiles, the raised columns underneath, and how they would get the smoke to go through, but then come back up and out, and so it would not get into the facility, but it would heat and then go out, and they had it. They had mastered the wind flow, suction, and all these things to make it streamlined. And so they were copying Loutraki to some degree. They were trying to build a thermae all throughout their culture. So they got so much benefit from these thermal natural cures that they decided to build that into their system. And so which wasn't too strange for them because you got to remember they were mining. There was a lot of salt brine mining operations. They were salt brine mining as well. They also took salts from the sea. All of these processes of mining for stone, not only like alabaster and marble and limestone. Greece is still 50% of the world's white limestone comes from Greece. It's still and limestone is just a different sister of what do you call it, marble. So 50% of the white marble in the world is coming from Greece, and that marble at an earlier stage is limestone or with different sets of parameters. And so this kind of mining and digging and the importance of salt. I mean, salt, salary, to be worth one salt. All of these things point to how important salt was to these civilizations. They built culture around salt. And you're like, wow, they were just obsessed. But the truth is they knew there was so much there. There was like, they called salt white gold, actually. And it was a soft, kind of stone, I guess, and that was able to be, pulled out, or you could do it through seawater, evaporation. There's many ways that they were able to get the salt, but also through mining and, finding sodium there, halite, and other types of, softer stone. And so they were able to mine all this, brine all this sometimes, depending on what they were trying to do, heat these things, brine, heat, transform. They made concrete from slake lime and other types of limestone combinations. They would use seawater in that concrete and mortar. And they had a lot of really interesting, I guess you could call it, natural God proportions on how they used calcium and mag, even in their own structures and what they created. And so the Greeks were kind of like the foundation. People point to the Romans and like, the lead lining of all the baths, and they're like, see, that was the lead that killed them. And and there may be some truth to that, but the funny thing is the high magnesium waters and the high magnesium bath system, actually magnesium does reduce the contamination by lead, and it can be used to clean lead out of water and beryllium and other things. So especially in like a concentrated like form like bittern. So what is bittern? Bittern is a very important idea because it's when you go through salt mining, this will all connect in the end, so don't worry. But when you go through salt mining, there's this side product that's produced, which is a kind of a sulfate magnesium chloride kind of, I wouldn't say it darker, but it's more like, I guess it can get close to dark in some places depending on different particularities, but it's more of like a more viscous side product that comes out of the salt mining operations. Now, well, some areas you may not have as much of it because of the clay or the winds or the northern winds, and kind of like in Brittany with the clay, and so things get absorbed back, and there's this kind of perfect environment. But in a general sense, like especially with solution mining and salt mining and things like that, like the bittern is a natural product from salt production, and it's not a small product either. It's a very quantitative product, even even relative to salt. So I mean, you'll have like a cubic meter of this stuff for every like ton of salt or whatever it is. And so there is quite a quantity of it. And so were they using that to clean the water? Were they using that for other applications? Brine? Were they using it in their bath massage system as well, like using it as an unguent or a medication? There's historical references in Pliny the Elder where they talk about some of this. These things being used for medicinal purposes, and so that was a pure magnesium chloride. That's what that was. That was a magnesium chloride, not pure. I mean, I guess it was kind of like chloride, sulfate, little bit of combination. Nothing's exactly pure in that natural way because they didn't do things like we do today with that separation, sterilization. They had it in the natural state, so there was always these other oligo elements and everything. But so that was used for something. So getting back to Loutraki, when Loutraki is a natural bath, right? So it has the natural limestone basins and different particularities with high magnesium. Now Loutraki is famous for magnesium. It's one of its most famous properties, just like Epsom and other cities around the UK were famous for. Even in the States, there's many different springs that were famous for magnesium. So I even think there's something here in Texas near Marble Falls like that because of all the marble once again. So you go back to this kind of like there's like limestone basins and things like that where you can bump into a certain type of magnesium. Now, the thing is not all limestone is the same. And so a lot of the limestone in Greece, I mean, you have a mix, but there's also a lot of Dolomite limestone, or magnesian limestone is what it's called. So it's up to 50% magnesium. And so that is an interesting, I mean, that says a lot right there. So you're able to get that back out of there through heating, dissolving and heating, and so the natural process of thermals can bring that about, where you're heating and dissolving stone, and then that's bringing that back up into the water. And so that's making the water even more rich in magnesium than it would be, normally, because it's bringing more in all the time. And so that natural bath, they copied this and they set up this system around Greece, and they would use limestone basins. Just like a lot of the baths were created through their natural stone properties, they were kind of copying some of that. I mean, they used mud too, and clay, and different things, which the clay is also high magnesium in that part of the world. A lot of it is. It's called Montmorillonite, which is like very green clay. It has a high magnesium compound in it. Magnesium is the master molecule of the chlorophyll constellation. I mean, it's not called that, but the chlorophyll molecule has as its sun or its center the magnesium, just like the hemoglobin molecule or constellation. I like to call it that because it just gives an image of central and peripheral. The center of that hemoglobin molecule is iron, and so magnesium is the center of the chlorophyll molecule in the plant world. So it concentrates in the Montmorillonite. So anyway, whatever they had, and that was also dissolvable by water and heat and things like that. It doesn't mean it dissolves all the structure when you say that. It's just things have a porous nature. Clay is porous. So at a micro level, it does have a leaching effect. And despite how good the earthenware is, if it's not coated with something else, then or whatever that coating has to, you have to verify what that is and how permanent that is. But in general, it's porous and things come out through heat and time. And so this Loutraki system was copied back out into all the other systems in Greece, and they set up a a man-made bath system copying this, and they would use the limestone, and they would also use mortar. Mortar was one of the base layers that was facing the water, that was touching the water. It was like mud and limestone and also mortar. And so the mortar was made through limestone, like slake limestone and seawater and other combinations that they would use to make their concrete, which we don't fully have the exact recipe, I don't think, today, but they've tried to recreate it. And it's really interesting what they came up with. This like seawater influenced concrete was very interesting because they thought, typical people would say, oh, magnesium's a softer stone, so why would you put it in with concrete? Because no, 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 no. And so we want something that's more and more hard, And then so that's kind of ridiculous because your teeth, they would break if they were too hard, right? They need magnesium to make them somewhat soft or flexible, you could call it, like a flexibilizing power that rounds out the calcium and makes it strong, not brittle. And so the Greeks knew this and they built structure with it. And there's a lot of areas where they would use more of this seawater enhanced concrete, and which, using the salts and the mag and all that stuff there. Was the bittern used? I don't know. I don't know about that, but because we don't know. But what I'm saying is they realized that those softer elements would create this porousness, and then that porousness would be filled in over time with other elements through the sea, and especially in the areas around the sea where this concrete was. So where they find this concrete, they find that it's grown stronger over time, not weaker, which is kind of an amazing property. And that's because the water's been enhancing it through its own porousness. And so that's kind of like how we would want our teeth or anything else to be built, have some strength that endures in time and endures. So they copied this system into the rest of Greece, and they built their baths out of the mortar and the limestone and the mud, and even their pipes and sewers and the water system. Everything was not. This was not Rome yet, so they had lead. They used it for certain things, but they didn't use it for their all of their irrigation and water drinking and pipe and plumbing systems. No, they did a little bit of repairs with lead. They would repair things sometimes with lead, or there'd be like little, like repairs to metal and different other types of things where they would use lead. But in general, they kept it clean or unclean, basically, to our eyes, because this would be technically a milky kind of water, not through the water supply, but definitely in the baths. It would be a milkier kind of like mineral, kind of dirty, a little funky kind of water for us. It wouldn't be dirty per se, but it would be dirty, technically, because there would be like clay and magnesium particles that were dissolved into it through heat of this system of heating this water in this basin all the time. And then they weren't bathing like once every year. Okay, these people were bathing like daily if they could, or multiple times a week. There was a lot of bathing going on. It became the center of the culture. And so over time, and so once things were all established and everything. So anyway, what were they doing? What was the mystery of all this? Well, it was magnesium. There's other things in water. There's sulfur. There's oligo elements. There's different things. But as far as Loutraki and as far as that center, that centerpiece, it's kind of like Bath in England, Epsom in England, and then you also have like Spa, which is a city. That's a city in Belgium. But all these places had something interesting about the water, or the minerals there, and how that was getting into the water. And so we're coming back to what this mystery was: the mystery of magnesium, the mystery of history as far as health goes, and even the fountain of youth. The fountain of youth is basically those minerals being broken down in that earth, being sent back up to the system, and brought back into the waters for us to absorb much easier than we could through pills. The pills are kind of like a half-truth paradigm that not only pulls us out of a relational capacity with the minerals and our feeling and our intuition and how it feels on the body, and that how we seek that. I mean, hot springs have been forgotten about, but when you can find a few of them, you end up meeting some pretty intelligent people there. Just like if you go to a seafood restaurant where they have a lot of like oysters and lobster and things that are very like high mineral and helpful and high iodine, you end up meeting smart people there too. So it's just a question of, I'm not saying just that alone, but there is a question of, people seeking out these things for health benefits, smart people seeking them out. And so minerals are the key to the fountain of youth anyway, and the aging and everything else. So we demineralize, and we've been doing that for a long time. Magnesium has led to cancer. It is the single most important deficiency for cancer as far at the physical level, because the physical level the structure has degraded through calcium preponderance, because the magnesium levels are low through the life cycle, and therefore all the tissues have a certain type of rigidity to them, which is not always detectable, but which is allowing for less oxygen. And that's the key, is the structures don't breathe as well without magnesium at high levels through the life cycle. And that's what the Greeks had figured out. You've got to keep these levels up, and that was the way they did it. So we're kind of having to go back and delegate back out to them that foundation, that mineral core physical body foundation. It doesn't mean that they have all the freedoms in the world and gun rights and constitutional rights and every democracy all the way. I mean, they did start it, but it doesn't mean that they have everything. It just means that in the level of the body and certain other levels, they really they helped get that whole thing started. They set up the foundation. I mean, the foundations of democracy, the foundations of philosophy, a lot of those foundations were set up there. So we have to give them the foundational part, and we allow that to inform us here in the post-foundational, world that we're in, which gives us our footing back, and we don't lose touch with reality, which is what's happening now with all of the millions of things can heal you, but your foundation, and is not one of the things we need to fix, or your deficiencies or whatever. Let's just leave that alone, and let's just worry about, millions of doctor's visits and vaccines and all this kind of world we're in. So we're trying to help people find this wisdom. And, if you trace it through Epsom, I mean, Americans know about Epsom salt. So it's kind of traceable to some degree through the skin, this whole idea of bringing that through the skin. And Epsom was a very popular idea. It expanded from Epsom. The idea of Epsom salts and baths, and that got copied from there and went around the world. And it was like we were trying to get back to that level. The problem is that Epsom salt baths, the bath water is contaminated today. You don't even want to put anything in there. Like there's isotopes, there's atrazine, there's mercury, there's iodine 131, radon 22, there's chlorine and all sorts of different types of perchlorates, and there's so much fluoride. There's so much going on in there that cannot, and also endocrine disruptors, which cannot be removed. You can get all the best filtration system in the world and they won't be removed. I mean, maybe in the world, no. If you have that kind of money and you can get this kind of like rigged looking system that doesn't look like something that's prepackaged, where there's aeration combined with high levels of carbon, high levels of, osmosis and filtration using not plastic once again, but through stainless steel. And, there's a lot of stuff you got to do to pull this off. And so, buying glass bottled water is probably your best way for now. But, as far as getting the magnesium in your body, Epsom's not going to work through bath water. That's one. And then two, the Epsom salt isn't created the way it was anyway. Like it's not in its natural state. It's not this natural stone anymore. This is all made through synthesis, or even if it's not synthesis, there's solvent extraction and purification and sterilization, and they separate the sulfate, and then they pull off other elements, and they have to solvent extract it to get those elements off, and then they repackage it and whatever. And it usually comes from Asia, where they mine for asbestos and everything else. And I'm not just being dramatic. These are truths. It's like 80% of the world's magnesium comes from there, and Tibetan exploitation and everything else. And so this is not the way forward either, because it's not the right stone anymore. And then on top of that, the bath is not the way to go. So you have those two factors. And then the third factor is that it's not chloride, it's sulfate. And so magnesium sulfate has a more of a detoxifying feature on the level of the skin and the surface, and a little bit of cellular recharge. So, but chloride is really the intracellular vehicle. It's really the major molecule within the human body, the body uses, and the skin as well. It's the major component. It's the major magnesium component when you get into the sea as well. And so a concentrated form of it is how you can pull this off, this Greek mystery at your home. That's what we sell. Transdermal magnesium, Zechstein inside in the blue glass bottles with no other ingredients, silicone tubes for all of our, bottling process and doing things right. And so only one ingredient in the bottle, like this, just the brine itself, which has oligo elements and just natural composition. So, doing it right and getting that stuff through and using the body as a dosing vehicle, using your skin as a huge dosing vehicle. Look how small that kidney is. Look at how huge that skin is. The Greeks figured it out. We got to listen to them because guess what? We're got 95% deficient in magnesium, and coffee and sugar and everything else, and pill and toxins and all those things aren't helping either. But 95% deficient in magnesium, and we're about 60, 70 years into the pills. I mean, if you count the World War First and Second, I guess, where they had started these pills. But what I'm saying is we've got the pills. We've had them forever, and they don't solve the deficiency, and they never will. But they will work to some degree. So they'll keep you buying them because they do work to some degree. And then there's all the marketing and blood-brain barrier and all this kind of BS marketing that, pretending that the body is not selectively permeable, and that it can't bring things in. The skin is dead. It can't pull magnesium in. The couche corneum, or whatever they call that, the corneum layer of the skin is dead, and there's nothing going to happen there. So they have a very lack of observation to see how all of those systems, dead or not, are still connected to our lymphatic system and bring things into the blood and everything else. So there's just a kind of a myopic view on anything that seems almost like where they see death, typical Cartesian science, there's probably life process underneath there. So anyway, just try to come get the right stuff, heartoftradition.com. We're trying to help people make it through all this stuff and get themselves started on this. It's the number one deficiency in the world. It helps flexibility. It helps so many different things in the body, from injury to nervous system to sleep to helping hormones, the brain use sugar properly. There's so many other things in addition to the simple things of cramps and pains and inflammation. You can add as well the heavy metal detox, the aluminum detox, the chemical plastic detox through the sweat. So yeah, don't miss out. Get the right stuff. Come check us out at theheartoftradition.com.